questions.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I've given notice of the following private notice question addressed to the Honourable Prime Minister, Minister of Defence, Home Affairs and External Communication, Minister of Finance, Minister for Rodrigues and Outer Islands, whether in regard to the recent imposition of 10% tariff on Mauritian export to the United States of America, he will, for the benefit of the House, obtain information as to the impact thereof on the export sector, indicating the measures being taken to mitigate the effects thereof. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yes, Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes, Madam Speaker. It will be recalled that President Trump signed an executive order entitled Regulating Imports with a Reciprocal Tariff to Rectify Trade Practices that Contribute to Large and Persistent Annual United States Goods Trade Service Deficits on the 2nd of April 2025. The executive order imposes a baseline of 10% tariff on all imported goods as from the 5th of April 2025. The United States also intended to impose an individualized, reciprocal higher tariff proportionate to the level of its trade deficit with each country as from the 9th of April 2025. Thus, the reciprocal tariff on Mauritian exports would have been 40%. In this context, a working group has been set up at the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Regional Integration and International Trade to discuss the possible impact of that policy measure and the way forward for Mauritius. In consultations with the relevant public and private stakeholders, including the Mauritius Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Mauritius Export Association, and Business Mauritius. On the 7th of April, the Minister of Foreign Affairs had a meeting which included a high-level representatives from various ministries as well as public and private sector institutions with a view to charting the way forward and mitigating the fallouts on our economy. I have also chaired 2 meetings together with the Deputy Prime Minister and relevant ministers and officers. The following course of action was agreed. A, discuss possible avenues with the United States at the bilateral and regional levels. B, work with like-minded groups of countries, including AGWA-eligible countries, as well as African Union mission in Washington, D.C., with a view to devising a strategy to open up discussions with the United States. C, negotiate a bilateral trade agreement with the United States, which would provide the necessary predictability to our trading relations. You may recall, Madam Speaker, that I made a statement in the National Assembly on the issue. On the 9th of April 2025, President Trump announced that he has authorized a 90-day pause and subsequently only a 10% tariff would apply. I personally wrote a letter to President Trump to engage with the United States at the bilateral level and also to request for the suspension of the imposition of the tariff. In April, in addition, on the 22nd of April 2025, Honourable Ramphal and Honourable Mia jointly wrote to the United States Trade Representative proposing a bilateral agreement with a view to forging a stronger and more balanced relationship between the United States and Mauritius. The USTR has responded positively on the 29th of April 2025, and meetings will be held shortly between Mauritius and the United States. I would like to inform the House that a high-level delegation to be led by the Minister of Foreign Affairs will participate in the forthcoming 2025 United States-Africa Business Summit, which is organized by the Corporate Council of Africa on the 22nd to the 25th of June in Angola. Madam Speaker, tariffs have been dominating the headlines as the new U.S. administration drives sharp trade policy changes. Tariff will likely impact economic growth, inflation, trade dynamics, and financial stability. These abrupt policy changes have affected equity, bond, and currency markets. They have also led to heightened uncertainty elevated volatility, and severe lack of predictability. It makes policymaking very, very challenging. The IMF, in its April 2025 World Economic Outlook, has lowered its forecast for global growth by 0.5 percentage point, citing the ongoing trade tensions and the impact on both advanced and emerging countries. The OECD, in its March 2025 Interim Economic Outlook, forecast global growth slowing to 3.1% this year compared to an estimated growth of 3.3% in December of 2024, and amid important divergence across economies and regions. Risks to the global growth outlook are tilted to the downside. Accordingly, the IMF escalating trade tensions fueled by tariff announcement and subsequent countermeasures have significantly increased trade and policy uncertainty. This environment of unpredictability and rising protectionism is expected to hinder both short-term and long-term growth prospects. Furthermore, tighter global financial conditions, if inflation persists or if it regains an upward momentum, and heightened economic uncertainty would certainly increase financial stability risk. The potential for further asset price corrections, strains impacting non-bank financial institutions, and turbulence in sovereign bond markets add to these downside pressures, particularly for emerging market economies facing higher financing costs. Tariffs, which are taxes paid by importers, will likely lead to inflation. Before tariff imposition, global inflation was on a downtrend, although still above central banks' targets in some advanced countries. However, with tariffs, progress on disinflation may stall or even reverse course as high import prices and supply chain disruptions may lead to higher domestic prices. In the event that inflationary pressures directly emanating from the imposition of tariffs offset the disinflationary effects of lower output growth and potential trade diversion by China, policymakers could be faced with the challenges of stagflation, that is, a combination of slowing economic growth and higher inflation. For now, the uncertainty linked to tariffs appear to bear higher risks to the growth rather than to the inflation outlook. According to the IMF, global inflation is projected to average 4.3% in 2025, slightly therefore higher compared to the January 2025 forecast. Policy responses to tariffs will vary from country to country, depending on their specific circumstances, and there is no one size that fits all. In consultation with all stakeholders, we have conducted a scenario-based assessment of the impact of US tariffs on economic growth, inflation, trade dynamics, and financial stability. The assumptions are as follows. 1, tariff raises import prices initially. 2, tariff could lead to negative trade and output effect globally with knock-on effects on Mauritius. 3, monetary policy will vary from country to country. UK and the EU lowering interest rates with the US holding rates in the short term. 4, commodity prices may fall with decrease in demand, especially for food items and petroleum products. 5, what will happen to the US exchange rate against other currencies, in our case, the euro and the pound sterling. With global supply chains facing potential headwinds, our major trading partners taking a hit, our export sector may face challenges during 2025 through lower demand for goods and services. Accordingly, the real GDP growth projection is now more likely to be in the range of 3 to 3.5% for 2025, considering global economic uncertainty and downward revisions to the growth outlook for some of our major trading partners, which can potentially dent demand from these countries. Our scenario-based assessment plays out opposing effects regarding the impact of US tariffs on inflation. First-round effects may be a rise in inflation due to higher import prices. However, the contraction of our main trading partners could also compress global inflation as commodity prices take a hit. The net impact of US tariffs on inflation in Mauritius is likely going to be largely scenario-based, playing out the opposing effects. In addition, there are domestically generated inflation that we have to deal with services inflation and wage push inflation. Headline inflation stood at 2.5% in March 2025, its lowest value, Madam Speaker, since June 2021. However, core inflation, which strips off price movements of food items and movements in administered energy prices, have remained stubbornly sticky, upheld by higher prices of services and increase in wages. We project headline inflation close this year at around 3.5%, marginally lower than the previous projection of 3.7%. However, our scenario-based assessment shows that risks remain tilted on the upside as trading partner inflation rates could increase due to the imposition of tariffs and the fragmentation of global supply chains, which could raise global commodity prices, again pushing up import prices. Furthermore, the stickiness in services inflation due to higher nominal wages could tilt the risk to the inflation outlook further to the upside. We do not forecast any threat to financial stability. Madam Speaker, we are comforted that on the 12th of May, the United States and China, the two largest economies in the world, are de-escalating the tariff and trade tensions, including a 19-day suspension with a significant rollback of tariffs and non-tariff barriers at both nations engage in negotiations to ease tension and foster for a more cooperative economic and trade relationship. The financial market has reacted very positively to this new development, with significant gains in stock prices across the United States, Europe, and Asia, signaling an investor optimism about the potential for better trade and economic relationship within the two positive knock-on effects on the global economy. Madam Speaker, as announced in the government program, we are coming up with a new economic model that will transform our economy to build resilience to external shocks through diversification and economic reforms. These include: 1, diversification of trade to build resilience and mitigating risk; 2, regional integration with African countries by accelerating cross-border trade and investment; 3, transforming our economy to better withstand external shocks through economic reforms that will unlock new opportunities; 4, invest in food security and energy self-reliance with clean energy; embrace technology and innovation to add more economic clusters top our economic base; and finally, raise productivity and efficiency and export.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Your supplementary, you have supplementary question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the Honourable Prime Minister for his reply. Madam Speaker, time is of the essence, and although the US and China are trying to ease the situation now, there will be difficult times ahead. May I ask the Honourable Prime Minister whether he will inform the House where matters stand with regard to negotiations concerning the reauthorization of the AGWA following the visit of the Committee of Ways and Means of the United States Congress last year? Can we have some information on that?
There is no change in the AGWA at the moment. We're still at the same point.
Now, can the Honourable Prime Minister inform the House whether there has been any meetings or negotiations between the Mauritian government and the US authorities concerning imposition of that 10% tariff on our export to the US?
Yes, Prime Minister.
No, this is what I said in my answer, Madam Speaker. If you remember, I said there's going to be, we have agreed for bilateral talks, and this is meant to be in April or in June at some point.
Okay.
I put that question because my next question is related to that, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Prime Minister some time back had stated that he would talk directly to the US President regarding this situation. Will he inform the House whether he has already spoken to President Trump and the outcome thereof, whether there has been any phone conversation?
As I said, Madam Speaker, I wrote to President Trump on the 10th of April, I think, yes, 10th of April of this year, particularly on this question of tariff. This is what we propose. We'll have to wait to see when we get the appointment.
Can I ask the Honourable Prime Minister whether he will inform the House how the imposition of this new tariff on trade will influence, whether this has already been discussed at the level of government, how this will influence the negotiations for the reauthorization of AGOA?
No, this is something that we will discuss. Obviously, it was 40%, and then it was reduced to 10%. Now we have to wait for the bilateral talks, and also what I think there was a working group that we looked at all this, and there is going to be meetings with the United States Trade Department.
The Honourable Prime Minister, in his reply, stated that a meeting was held between government officials. That is where he chaired the meeting, I understand, and the Deputy Prime Minister was present. May I ask him whether he has already himself met with the representative of the private sector to discuss the mitigating strategies to better manage the increase in tariff? Whether this meeting has been held?
The Minister for Industry and the Foreign Minister have done so. We have to look at what are the propositions on the table first. I'm not going to jump and say, oh, this is going to happen, and therefore we will do this. We'll have to wait for the bilateral negotiations.
Are you happy?
Yes.
Because it keeps moving, as you know.
Yeah, of course,
It keeps
Madam.
moving every day, more or less. Yes.
The Honourable Prime Minister made reference to the possibility of a drop in revenue for foreign exchange. Can you inform the House whether we have an estimate of the impending drop?
We have looked at all the various scenarios, Madam Speaker, but as I said, we want to, I think I said earlier that the USTR has responded positively to the demand for meetings on the 29th of April of this year, and these meetings will be held shortly between Mauritius and the United States. I would rather wait to see what are the propositions on the table, what are the things that we can mitigate, and then we will move forward.
Sure. Yes.
In terms of employment, can I ask the Honourable Prime Minister whether he can inform the House whether any study with regard to the increase in tariff, whether any study has been carried out to assess the impact on employment, the employment sector in the country, whether there will be loss of jobs?
As I said, yeah, of course, we have to look at all the scenarios. But as I said, we're not going to panic and say this is going to happen and this. We'll have to wait for the bilateral talks and also the talks with the USTR, which, as I said, they responded positively to our demand, and the meetings will be held shortly.
Yes.
Now, with regard to the prevailing situation concerning trade with the US, will the Honourable Prime Minister inform the House whether we've started exploring new markets to export our products?
Okay. That's a different question.
It's a different question, but I can tell them that, mainly the only sector which is really at risk is textile and apparel. This is what is really at risk.
Now, in case we know this is going to happen, in case the different sectors are impacted, they're already being impacted now, Madam Speaker. If there is a further increase, is government envisaging to support the sectors affected in their ongoing operations, Madam Speaker?
I would rather wait, Madam Speaker, to see what are the outcome of the discussions before I start jumping the gun and saying this is going to happen, this is going to happen.
Shh. Let him
have
the floor.
Now, Madam Speaker, we know that 10% increase in tariff is detrimental to our economy. Can I ask government, and I urge government, to consider to urgently negotiate with the US authorities for a zero tariff, Madam Speaker, because 90 days will be over.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition, I think 3 times the Prime Minister has said that the meeting is going to be in June, if I am not mistaken. I don't see what he can say more on that issue. But you're okay. You can ask another question.
Yes, Madam Speaker.
I'm
This
sorry?
is very important. I said time is of the essence.
Of course.
We are already being impacted.
Yes.
Now, can I ask whether government is considering to set up a joint public-private committee to promote dialogue and advocacy in the interests of the business community in order to leverage on our exports potential and competitiveness? I'm asking whether they will set up a joint public-private committee, because that committee doesn't exist now.
No, it does. The Honourable Minister of Industry has had meetings with them, also with the Foreign Minister, also with others. We are looking at it. No? We're not just waiting and seeing what's going to happen.
Okay. Yes, you're done. Okay. Good.